Okay, my name is Bria and I'm going to be reviewing the speech on gun control, and his main claim was that banning handguns will fail to prevent violence. And his first secondary claim was that gun access is unrelated to crime. Criminals would be unaffected by a ban, and the lack of guns in citizens' hands would increase crime. So I'm going to refute this by showing how those are incorrect, and also about the overall topic of gun control in America. So my main claim is that enforcing gun control laws will ultimately prevent violence. And my first response claim is that gun access has shown a great relation to crime throughout the years. According to an article from The Atlantic in 2008, in the U.S. there were over 12,000 homicides involving firearms. An article done by CliffNotes.com found that each day, on average, 13 children under the age of 19 are killed by gunfire, and even more are injured. And they also found that homicide is the second leading cause of death for youth ages 10 to 19. And my second response claim is in response to the lack of guns in citizens' hands would increase crime. A study done by The Atlantic in 2006 found that in Japan, there were a total of 2 firearm-related homicides in a country of 128 million people. And in 2007, when there were 7 homicides, it was considered a national scandal. And in that country, little to no people have firearms in their homes. And also, my opponent mentioned in Australia how their gun laws weren't necessarily effective, but according to the Unfiltered News, only about 15 out of 100 Australians own firearms, and in 2009, the homicide rate was 0.01% per every 10,000. And my last and final response claim is that gun control proposals on the table here in America are not even focusing on banning handguns at all, but to put restrictions and implementations in place that will improve crime rates. President Obama's proposals are not to ban handguns, but to enforce background checks, ban military assault weapons, and high-capacity magazines, making schools safer, and improving the mental health services. Background checks will be required for all gun sales. Currently, under the federal law, private individuals are not required to conduct a background check before selling or transferring a firearm to someone who lives in the same state. So if this was a part of the law, it would reduce the illegal business dealings with firearms and put the restrictions needed on access to criminals. And banning the military assault weapons would get them off of our streets. The Connecticut State Police confirmed that the Sandy Hook Elementary shooter did in fact use a Bushmaster .223 with a round clip, and that is indeed classified as an assault weapon. So following that massacre, it's almost clear why making schools safer is high on the list. So these new laws would put up to 1,000 more school resource officers and counselors in schools. And lastly, improving mental health service would make sure that students and young adults get treatment for their mental health issues. So in conclusion, gun control is not about banning handguns and taking away our Second Amendment right to bear and keep arms. It's about putting forth new regulations and new methods to improve the crime rates in the U.S. to help gun owners be more responsible with having that right. President Obama said in a recent speech that our actions will not prevent every senseless act of violence in this country, but we were never sent here to be perfect. We were sent here to make a difference, make what difference we can to secure this nation, expand opportunity, and uphold our ideals through the hard, often frustrating, but absolutely necessary work of self-government. Thank you.
All right, you start off pretty well labeling the advocate's claims and secondary structures. You basically design you basically design an argument of your own that responds to the generic issues of gun control, and that's the last we hear about the advocate's arguments on these issues. From then on, everything is basically a counterclaim arguing issues that could potentially be applied to the advocate's points, but you need to make sure that you make those applications. And because we don't get any contrast to what the advocate's evidence or information was, I think that you're going to run into some problems. Now, when you talk on the first point, you talk about gun violence, and that's just factual information about the number of deaths that are occurring. It's the second argument that goes with it that makes this argument seem relevant, and that is that when countries have significant gun control, they have substantially less crime. And the example of Japan is illustrated. The problem is, from looking at the argument, is that your only example is one where they pretty much prohibit people from having guns, and none of the gun control laws, as you've identified, do that very kind of thing. So what's the likelihood that it would reduce the violence or reduce the number of deaths? That's where I think we need to have a little bit more information. The argument about Australia, I think, might be a little bit more applicable, but there's, again, I don't think that you do much contrasting of the evidence here. And what does your evidence mean in contrast to information that the advocate presented on that point? I think that needs to be a little bit sharper. The stuff about the security at the schools and about mental health, I'm not sure how that's relevant. Those don't sound like they are gun control issues. They don't relate to banning guns in any way, shape, or form. I doubt that there's any dispute on whether or not we ought to have school safety or mental health issues. There might be some dispute about whether or not we can afford those things. Everybody would like the schools to be safer and for people who have mental illnesses to get treatment. So the question is, do we have something that works to prevent that? And if we do we need the gun control laws? Or is the gun control laws, do they exist because we don't have those kinds of things, and they're supposed to fill in the gaps? And I think you needed to make a stronger argument on that particular point. The argument about the Sandy Hook shootings being done by an assault weapon, again, I don't think there's much dispute about that. The question is, would a ban on assault weapons have changed this? The old argument that comes up repeatedly is, look, if you've broken a law that says it's against the law to kill people, why are you more likely to obey a law that says you can't have this gun than you are a law that says you can't kill people? I think that's a little bit problematic. I think you could argue that there would be a smaller supply if there were restrictions, or that people who are on the edge would have less opportunity to get a hold of those guns, but you need to develop those arguments. All right, thank you.